Welcome. We're going to talk about mobility in this series of conversations. Today, we want to talk about the opportunity around mobility. It's a sensitive topic, it's a personal topic. Everybody has an opinion on this topic. It covers citizens, it covers government, it covers policy, of course, it covers infrastructure, it covers finance. There's a lot of elements to it. What we want to focus on today, with Manoj is that what opportunities does it create for the future and what vision should we have? So just as a start, my name is Narendra Bhandari. I'm a general partner at Seafund. We've been investing in tech and deep tech companies over the last several years. We've observed this sector with the lens of how technology can enable many of the mobility solutions. Hence, we have a bit of a view, but we'd love to get an expert's view on how mobility shapes up. Manoj, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Narendra. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's a great topic and very, very personal because I'm coming from the automotive background, spending more than 21 years in the industry. So mobility as a landscape, I think there's a massive opportunity for us to make the movement of people and goods from A to B very, very seamless and efficient. Today, if you see the kind of challenges that we're facing, if we just talk about the personal mobility, it's very, very hard for people to get into normal government transport and they are looking for a personal mobility. But it's not affordable today. The technology is evolving rapidly and for people to adopt the technology, that also is a big challenge because for them to understand, while they understand the technology through the phones, but understanding the technology through the vehicle is a bit of challenge today. And that's where I see a great opportunity for the entire startup ecosystem in India to get into innovation. Look at what's happening in China, how the softwares are being developed. The entire consumer world is moving into the vehicles. And that's where we see people like Xiaomi building cars. So that's a change that I think we are going to see soon in India. And that's where I'm very, very happy and looking forward to the startup ecosystem to bring something really, really innovative.
I think enough has been written about and talked about where cars are really software on a bunch of metal and silicon. I mean, in simple terms. So there's two connotations to this. One is there's a lot of software which is powering the car or powering the vehicle, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, etc. And there's a lot of software which is enhancing the driving experience, whether it is an ADAS or it is your media or it is connected services, etc. What do you think, what's the impact of that or what's the opportunity in that for sort of the Indian, developer ecosystem or the founder ecosystem, right? Because clearly these are software on silicon and pieces of metal.
Yeah, absolutely. So the shift from sheet metal to software is a big change which is happening in India, and I think when we talk about technologies like ADAS, which is primarily there in the four-wheelers industry, not in so much in the two-wheelers, while it's getting into it, the important part which is missing today is there's no governing policy which mandates for all the vehicles to have the ADAS. Just like an example, if your car has a emergency braking system, right, it's a great feature, right? If something comes ahead of you, the vehicle stops. What if there's a car behind you is not having that feature? It's going to bang you. So I think there's a lot of standardization which is needed, and there's a huge potential where startups can play definitely a big role building those standardized stacks, saying that which can go across. And government needs to help building the policy, saying that please adopt this and build the applications over it.
See, we've talked about this at least while we used to live in the US. One thing we would observe is on a highway or a freeway, everybody is driving at a certain pace, whatever the speed limit is. There are very few people who are 50% below the speed limit or even 20% below the speed limit, right? Some people may be passing the speed limit, but let's assume for a moment, 80% of the people are around 10% of the speed limit. The asymmetry in India is very wide.
Yes.
There are people on a 75cc two-wheeler and there are people driving a 4-liter engine and, of course, the larger vehicle. That's not going to change in India.
For sure.
Right? That asymmetry, or at least that diversity, will exist. How do you see that? Because to your point, you can't mandate an emergency brake for every vehicle which is on the road. How do you see that asymmetry or variety shaping future of digital services or mobile services or value-added services or safety in mobility and transport?
So I think very valid question, because when we talk about the diversity of vehicles, the variety of vehicles, and the behavior of people on the road is very different in India. Discipline is something completely missing, which is probably a good in European countries, right? So how technology can help is, one is things like blind spot detection is something becoming very, very popular in India in the cars. Anybody coming from your left, when you're either taking a turn, changing the lane, or opening the door, you get an alarm. I think that's something, the basic alert system in the vehicles, be it two-wheeler or four-wheeler, is mandatory. We need to get that. At least you know something going to happen and take an action. You may not reach to a level where every vehicle itself can take an action, but at least it's good enough a indication for people to take an action. Vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to infrastructure communication, which is, I think, is very weak today. We don't have it in India, while the other countries have progressed a lot. I think there's a lot of work that all of us can do.
There's a statistic which I won't go into too much detail, which is very disturbing, and that is the number of deaths on the road every day. It's amongst the highest in the world, is what I'm told. Is there a vision that technology can reduce that by like maybe 90%? You talked about vehicle to vehicle. It's just, I mean, if we just remove all else and put focus on value of human life on the road, tech can help safety quite a bit, don't you think?
100%. I think it's all about mindset and giving safety as a priority for the OEMs when they start building the vehicle. It's not just technology, even the core sheet metal that we talk about helps people to save their lives. I think a important part is, again, I'm coming back to the software.
Sure.
Because whenever we talk about technology, sensors and the hardwares, they are all available. Getting into that space, yes, possible, but it's a bit of longer process.
Okay.
But software is something where the startups can move very, very quickly.
Okay.
Build stacks, build protocols, which can then be enabled for vehicle-to-vehicle communication, be it between the two-wheelers, be it between the four-wheelers. You'll see a lot of bikers when they're on the highways, they keep giving a lot of signals from their hands, etc. Right? For the bikers who are coming behind, all that can happen through the technology. So I think there is a lot of possibility. Platooning is another thing for heavy vehicles.
What is platooning? Sorry,
So when they are running on the highways, right, on the same lane, so they can run autonomously on the same speed.
Oh yeah. I've seen those videos of 6 trucks just moving at the same pace and stuff. Yeah.
Save energy, and then it's very easy for the drivers to drive those vehicles.
Got it.
So those kind of things, I think technology is just available. What startup ecosystem needs to do it to make it affordable, make it Indian. Today, most of these technologies are all coming from outside.
So one thing so there are 2 distinct electronic systems in the car. One is, of course, what runs the vehicle, safety, engine, all of that stuff. Then there is all this media, navigation, entertainment, all of that stuff. This is, let's say, one block which comes from the manufacturer. Then there is your phone, right? In many cases, actually in most cases, the phone probably is a little bit more advanced than what's in the car, because the manufacturers have to go through a longer cycle of approvals and stuff like that. Just like Android Auto or Apple Auto, Apple CarPlay. Don't you think there's an opportunity for these two to collaborate and deliver many of these services much faster?
I think it's a very, very important question, and I'm sure most of the OEMs are working building your own OS and get a bit out of dependency from Google or Apple.
Okay.
For that matter. And Then we talk about media, it's all there. There's a huge ecosystem for the media, be it the podcast or your music or news or anything is all available. Getting that into the vehicle is not a big deal. It's all streaming. Once your vehicles are connected, getting that stream to the car is all possible. The challenge is that when you compare phone to a car, phone is something you can just sit and watch. Car is something you are driving it. So we also have limitations, and we are very, very careful when we design and things like that. We also need to be sure that we are not distracting the driver. So limited set of things which can help driver or the passengers being more effective, more productive when they are sitting inside the car is something we are looking forward to it, and I think that's how it should be done.
Okay. Questions from you?
When we if for OEMs, it's very difficult to really have a full view of the startup ecosystem. They're into pockets with a lot of aggregation organizations. And how do you see that? Because I see that as a challenge, saying that when OEMs want to get a breakthrough through a startup ecosystem, how do we really get to that connection? And
Sure.
how you as a venture capitalist, you see that which are the core areas based on our conversation and the experience that you have, which are the areas where you see that a lot of startups are going to get funded and they'll grow in India.
Yeah, awesome points, right? Very relevant, at least for our daily lives. First is there is always the creativity of the founders or the developers to come up with an idea based on their observation, and then they build a solution, and of course with their grit and energy, make it public. If you go back to the days of people forming an Uber, right? That idea didn't necessarily come from an OEM or working with the OEM. It came up as a challenge, which is I solve my problem and I'm able to go from point A to point B and get something very quickly for me. Your question was more around how do you engage with this sort of ecosystem? So 2 or 3 things. One is many large companies have formed what you would call an equivalent of a developer network or a innovation network or an acceleration network. The value you bring as a manufacturer or as an OEM or as a principal is an understanding of where the trajectory of technology is, where the trajectory of consumer behavior is, and of course a market which you have access. You can outline your top 5, 10 opportunities or challenges, let's just say. You put this out in public domain in some format, or even within a closed network, and let people innovate. And you can partner with an industry organization, let them innovate, let them bring solutions to you, initially maybe in a closed door environment and then in a more sort of open environment. I work for a large company, so I know that innovation in a large company has a pace which may be slower than how an innovation can happen in a startup company or in a founder network. Right?
Absolutely.
So you're able to benefit from that pace and freshness of ideas because they're unfettered. But where you really add value is, of course, you provide them the opportunity, but you provide them very quickly a test bed to try out that stuff.
Yes.
I think that's something I would encourage you to do very strongly. Work with any third-party organization, industry body, or even your own developer network, corporate developer network, and put out those challenges and give small amount of resources and tools to people so that they can come and work with you. So as a venture capitalist, what we look for is, of course, the basic market. So if somebody comes and says, I'm going to solve a Namayatri, or I'm going to build a Uber, or I'm going to build a Ola, or I'm going to build another mobility solution, we obviously want to look at size of the market, players, founders, technology, idea, business model, etc. But in this conversation, if a large principal, an OEM, tells us that, hey, this is something which we want or would strongly look at, it helps our cause quite a bit. So we like to invest, and if you see our portfolio, we have invested probably sometimes even a little ahead of time. We invested in robotics and mobility way back in 2019 in Indian companies. We started investments in drone-based logistics, let's say even 3 years ago. We took up positions in EV infra companies almost 2 years ago. We bet on semiconductors. We've invested in a space tech company trying to build data centers in space. So as capitalists, we will take bets, but it's going to be useful if principals like you are able to provide that air cover saying, yeah, these are problems which are sort of interesting to me. So I would encourage you to look at that either individually or in partnership with somebody, and we're happy to sort of work with you.
Perfect.
Anything else on your mind in terms of this ecosystem?
Few more points.
Sure.
I don't want to miss those points. The ecosystem data. There's no standardized platform. I think that's one area where I think startups definitely can do something really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So, the entire ecosystem space, be it government data or the policies or the infrastructure, if that can come as a one platform, and of course with the legals, policies, the privacy policies, security policies in place, and the standard ways of accessing that data, I think OEMs can build a lot of value.
Yeah, to that point, somebody long ago mentioned this to me, that if you take a phone, the phone has many sensors. Every sensor has created an additional billion-dollar industry.
Yes,
The GPS sensor has created a multi-billion-dollar industry,
absolutely.
right? And we're all beneficiaries of that. Cameras, let's not even talk about cameras, right? Cameras has created $100 billion. Apple has created, or God knows, $1 billion Instagram, which Instagram largely relies on the cameras from your phone, and it has built a large industry. To your point about a platform, right? So all these sensors have created multi-$100 billion industries. We are beneficiaries of the India stack. UPI as a platform is a story which has just shocked everybody across the world in terms of cost per transaction.
Yes.
Right? Insignificant cost in the variety of the transactions going through from 5 rupees to, upper end is the limit. I think that's where the intersection of policy, startups, and academia, and to some extent large corporates will come in, where an automotive stack,
Yes,
right, an India automotive stack is going to be an extremely valuable thing. Safety, regulation, revenue. We talked about tolls, right? I think this whole concept of a physical toll where you pass through and some kind of a, lever goes up and down based on your credentials, something to be relooked at completely differently.
interestingly, there's a regulation which is going to be applicable soon, and it's a GNSS-based tolling. So no toll booths,
Yeah.
no long queue. Once your vehicle passes through that zone, there's a geofencing, and
Yeah.
automatically the
Yeah.
the money is getting detected for whatever is that value for that highway, etc. The only challenge I see is that's going to be true for highways. What exactly is going to happen in the cities is, I think, is still an open challenge.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to do on that.
There's another idea for startups to go off and do, right? I think the way I think about this, just to sort of wrap up this conversation, is that there's clearly opportunity for founders to be able to build core elements of the stack,
Yes.
right? Which go into a vehicle or which sit on top of the vehicle hardware and software. And like you mentioned, it could be at the base layer, it could be navigation layers, it could be other services, it could be safety. And I think the number of cameras in a car which you can add is like unlimited, right? I mean, you can add a camera at pretty much every layer. Like tire pressure has become so commoditized that it's kind of interesting. So that's the core infrastructure layer of the car, which will of course go through the OEMs and safety and security, all of that stuff. I think the other opportunity I see is just around drivers, behaviors, safety, services while I'm driving. This opens up an immense amount of opportunity, commercial opportunity for developers to build sort of new and interesting applications. Traffic is clearly a challenge in many parts of the world. If we had more intelligent analytics powering our driving behavior on a daily basis, on an hourly and a minute-by-minute basis, there's a very good chance we could decongest a little bit, right? And by intelligently sort of routing traffic, which I think some of the maps solutions do that today to a large extent. But there's probably opportunity to do this in an Indian context in a much more significant way, right? So Yeah, I think the space is ripe for opportunity.
Absolutely.
There's probably a several $100 billion market to be explored
Yes.
beyond the hardware itself
Absolutely.
to be able to go off and offer services. So,
So true.
great. Thanks for the conversation, Manoj.
Thank you so much, Narendra. It was a pleasure, and I think it's a very interesting topic.
Great,
Yes,
great.
yes.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Happy riding, everybody.